Hello, everyone. This is what your pastor didn't tell you. Today, I am on with Dr. Kick. Where did that come from? Kipp Davis, and we're going to be talking about Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of pictures and Google Maps. So this
Oh,
is
look
like
at
you
this
can go
picture.
on Google and look at this. It's like a 360 view, and these are the Dead Sea Scrolls that Kip keeps telling people about. And we're like, gosh, Kip, we heard enough of it, but here we are. We're talking about it again.
Let's see it.
Yeah, we're
As a friend of mine likes to say, let's see it.
let's see it. There you go. All right, how you doing today, Kip?
I'm doing very well. Having a great weekend. So, and it's nice. It's nice to be. I haven't been here on your channel in a long time.
Yeah.
So, it's nice to be back. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm glad. All right. So let's see here. Okay, cool. All right. So today we are going to talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, why they are important. We're going to talk about the actual caves themselves. We're going to show you pictures. I have watched a lot of your videos, Kip. I've watched and read books and stuff like that, but I've never actually had someone go, "Hey, this is the actual cave. This is
Oh,
the place where they
okay.
stayed at, and all this other stuff." So just a few weeks ago, I was like, I really need to look into this. And so then I spent a lot of time researching. And then, of course, we're going to have you on just to, have a little insight because
Cool.
you have a very particular perspective, of course. So
I have a very special set of skills.
a
Is that
very special, yes.
so we'll yeah, no, let's do it. Let's see what's out there.
Awesome. All right. So, of course, there are the caves and there is the actual site. But people might be asking, why is this important? Obviously, there are the manuscripts before the Dead Sea Scrolls, before we found them, 70 or so years ago. They, like, as far as biblical manuscripts, we didn't really have a lot. I mean, the most was what, from the Middle Ages, essentially, around
Yeah,
there.
that's where in terms of Hebrew manuscripts of biblical texts, almost everything that we had came from the late Middle Ages, closer perhaps even to like the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, that sort of thing. Like
Hmm.
the oldest complete copies of the Torah were from the 9th, 10th century CE. But there was a smattering, a handful of smaller fragments and texts that were earlier. Maybe most famously, so there's I'll just say, like, at the University of Manchester, my alma mater, there are on display just like a couple of very small, tiny little Hebrew fragments from manuscripts that certainly predate the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codex, but they're just tiny little Hebrew fragments, right? So we had those. Most famously, we had the Nash Papyrus, which is it's a single sheet. It's about this big. It's papyrus. It's the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. A really interesting text because it's a mix of text between Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5.
Hmm.
But that was, and it's been dated to the mid 2nd century BCE. There's been some questions raised with regards to that date more recently. This is actually part of a project that I had started uh, 5 or 6 years ago that I kind of abandoned. I'd like to get back into at some point, but more work needs to be done on the Nash Papyrus. But that was kind of it, right? Prior to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's what you had. You had like the Nash Papyrus, and you had these medieval codices and some Torah scrolls, which
Hmm.
were all very late. But then nothing else, nothing in Hebrew. Of course, there were Greek translations, Septuagint manuscripts that predated this, but nothing in Hebrew. So the
Yeah.
Dead Sea Scrolls really just kind of filled that empty space. And that's one of the remarkable things about the discovery when it was made in 1947, which is actually coming up on 80 years now. You said 70, and I was like, yeah, that sounds right. But then I'm like, wow, suddenly it's 2025. So, you know, it's yeah. So one of the things that was so remarkable in that moment was that it was widely considered among scholars that there just was no possibility even of the preservation of manuscripts from that time period, just by nature of their ideas with regards to, the material and just the, the feasibility that anything could
Huh.
could survive. The good thing is that the Dead Sea Scrolls were all stashed in caves, which are dark and dry, which are, good things for manuscripts, and that's why they survived. So that's kind of the remarkable thing about it. Um,
Yeah.
do you want me to keep talking, or do you
No,
want to?
you're.
Because I
I
can.
was.
No, I'm.
Oh, I bet you could. So I think there's a lot of different, maybe things that maybe if you thought about it a little bit, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's really really significant. But some things that just stood out for me is just views of Satan and views of inspiration of the text that we just have completely different views of because we have this group that essentially put a bunch of
Mm,
scrolls in caves, and because of that we can see what they thought about their Bible, their Old Testament, what text they thought, or like the idea of a canon in general, as that didn't really exist at all. And there's just a lot of pretty wild views, but also things that make us update a lot about what we thought the original writers of the Old Testament or even people of this time period thought.
oh, I mean, yeah, like there's an awful lot there, and this is all still stuff that we're rethinking and reconsidering. Uh, these are ongoing conversations within among scrolls scholars. The ideas when the first discoveries were made, in large part to um sorry, just to back up a little bit. So
Sure.
when the first discoveries were made, one of the things that scholars noticed right off the bat was that, and that's what got them excited, was the fact that these were copies. They recognized there's biblical texts in here. Two of the first manuscripts that were discovered were Isaiah scrolls A and B from Cave 1. There was a commentary on the book of Habakkuk discovered there, which contained text from the book of Habakkuk. As more and more discoveries were made, scholars started to find more and more individual copies of biblical texts. And with so much volume, with so much material that was suddenly at disposal, there the organizing m- the organizing metric that was used for sorting the material was just to work from, the way I like to talk about it is working from what's known to what's unknown. So scholars would recognize texts. So if you have, a fragment with text that you recognize from the book of Genesis, you're just gonna set that aside and catalog that as a fragment of the book of Genesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really was, in the first place, just a way of more conveniently, efficiently sorting the material between things that are biblical versus things that are non-biblical, right? But in that process, we also scholars also discovered texts that they knew, they recognized from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were not necessarily biblical. Things like First Enoch, things like the Book of Jubilees, things like the Aramaic Levi document were things. Even something like what we've come to know as the Damascus document, which used to be called um, what was it? It was like a Zadokite, like a Zadokite treatise or something. I'm getting this wrong, but this is a text that was known from the Cairo Geniza discoveries of some 60, 70 years earlier. But the copy they found of the Damascus document in the Cairo Geniza uh, was much later, right? I think like 8th, 9th century. So here they found fragments of the same text in
Hmm.
the Dead Sea Scrolls that dated hundreds of years earlier. But that's, that right away. It goes into this pile here of so-called non-biblical texts. Uh, the I hope you can appreciate and see what happens over time where this, I think, just generally starts to promote an artificial distinction because we just have no clear way of evaluating what the people who actually wrote and collected these texts considered as biblical versus non-biblical, certainly in a world at a time when there was no Bible. So we talk about things like authoritative or scripture
Hmm.
to try and get away from that a little bit. But these are still questions, these are still conversations that are ongoing with regards to even how are we determining that much. And there's various ways that scholars go about trying to do this. Just counting the numbers, of individual copies of manuscripts is helpful for providing some sense of how important they thought this particular text was as compared to some of these other texts. The number of times they were actually cited or quoted in other texts is a way of indicating how important or how authoritative some of these texts were. One of the things that I and my colleague Matt Monger have been trying to do, and this was something that uh, Dr. David Carr actually talked about in the interview that I had with him on Friday in
Hmm.
terms of his own work, is actually doing some evaluation of the physical material as a means to determine not just what's there in terms of these actual manuscripts, what we have left of them, but trying to decide based on their scribal features and their size, something pertaining to their function and even their significance and usage for these people who collected the manuscripts, the fragments. Well, they weren't fragments when they were collecting them, the
Hmm.
manuscripts, right? So, like, I'm sorry that that's such a long answer. But it's like it is a really really complicated question and it's ongoing.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do, lots of people are going to think it's mean, but one of the things that I'm trying to do is get past these categories. Like
Hmm.
forget about scripture versus non-scripture or Bible versus non-Bible. These are, let's just talk about what's in these manuscripts and why the people who wrote and collected them
Hmm.
were writing and collecting them, right? So and I think that's and I'm not, this is not because I just think this is a useful heuristic moving forward for thinking about some of this material that we have there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned a lot of different things there. So, of course, when you mentioned the amount of manuscripts we have, unless if things have changed
Mm,
recently, the Book of Jubilees
hmm.
and Book of Enoch were on the among the top, or maybe the top, which is really fascinating because, of course, Christians today aren't going to be like, Oh yeah, those are the inspired texts. Those are actually that didn't make
Well,
it. Like,
a lot of Christians, but I mean, let's not forget about the poor
yeah,
Ethiopics.
you're right. You're right.
And
Those poor
so I
poor
like
guys.
this question of canonicity, right, is a complicated one. But yeah, I think you're right. Most people who come from Protestant traditions certainly have a very fixed idea with regards to what constitutes the Bible, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah, and uh, yeah. So let's dive into it. And just so you know, I might be putting some pictures on the screen. Feel free to keep talking if you want, and I'll just try to make things cool. But all right, so here we have on the screen.
oh,
This is Qumran. So in the bottom left here we have caves 4 to 10, and although that's not completely true because apparently some of the caves are to the right, that we'll talk about later. But anyway, so and there's also some caves over here in the top left. So, what me and Kip were
yeah.
talking about earlier was that a lot of this stuff that you see online isn't completely true. There's a lot of misinformation about the pictures, and yeah, so we'll
That
be
I am contributing to,
that you're
apparently. But
contributing it to. Gosh, yeah, today we're doing it as a group. And then we have at the top right here. So we have little buildings that, or I guess maybe it's one building. Who knows? And so
no,
like you can actually go here, like if you want to travel to what is it technically Israel? I don't know. Is it Jordan?
no,
Where is this all at?
this is the West Bank. So it's so I it is technically
Technically
uh
Israel.
Palestinian
Okay.
under Israeli
Yeah.
control. Jordan is just on the other side of the Dead Sea. You can
Oh,
see it
okay.
there in the background, those hazy cliffs, those hazy mountains.
Hmm.
That's the Transjordanian plateau there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's what we're looking at here. This picture is looking from the south to the north on the western shore of the Dead Sea,
Hmm.
which is shrouded in the like the hazy stuff there.
Yeah.
That's where the actual Dead Sea is.
Yeah.
So and what we have here, let's talk first about the caves
Yeah.
in the bottom left hand corner. You've got and the ones that you can see there uh most clearly are cave 4, which is easily the most significant and the largest the most significant of probably all the caves, because that's where most of the manuscripts were housed or deposited, were discovered from there. Um, yeah, there it is. That's K4. You'll notice too that there is a couple. There's actually 3 entrances to the caves, to this particular cave. The easiest way to get in and out is actually from on top. There's like an opening from above there. You can
You
see.
mean right here?
Yeah. So,
Oh.
and just because the you know the faces leading up to it are pretty sheer.
Yeah.
I've never actually been inside any of the caves, but I've been to the like I've been to the entrance here.
Mm.
So yeah, you're looking. So yeah, so you're looking from the site across this this I don't know what you call it. It's not really the wadi itself
Yeah.
is like to the left here, just beyond the cave. That's Wadi Qumran, which floods in the wintertime. And it's yeah, so it was loaded with manuscripts. There's a few more caves there, caves 5, 6, 7, um, located on the same marl here. Uh, and then I think, and I might get this wrong too, but I think in this cluster I often get these mixed up. But I think 8, 9, and 10 were on the other side But I could be wrong on that without thinking through.
Oh,
This is an interesting sort of
yeah.
reconstruction here. This is
So this
Cargill's, right?
yeah, right. So
Yeah, yeah,
Robert
yeah.
Cargill, who
So
has his own YouTube channel, he
yeah,
did some type of 3D
this
VR
was part of
type
his
thing.
PhD actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an
So
interesting read. So he had a dissertation like discussion, and then at the
yeah,
bottom of the dissertation, he's got all these fun pictures that we'll go through. But yeah, so these
yeah, shit.
three are really interesting to me because they are man-made, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and even today,
So
they aren't even like really there anymore. They've kind of eroded.
nope, they're basically gone. And that's part of the discussion of this too, right? Is assessing the function of these caves on the basis of on the in the first place the proximity to the site. One of
Hmm.
the reasons um the caves were discovered first, but right at the point that they were discovered, they already knew about this set of ruins, which for I believe up to this time was just assumed to be like a Hasmonean fort, and it
Mm,
probably served that function at some point and was
okay.
abandoned and then occupied by this religious group. But it was with the discovery of the caves that sparked all of a sudden a ton of interest in these ruins, which
Hmm.
were close by. Because uh, so every one of the 11 caves that contained, well, there's actually only 10 caves that contain manuscripts, but every one of the 11 caves that were part of the original discovery, and we can talk a little bit about Cave 12 here in a bit, but every one of these is within a 1.5 kilometer radius of the site. So they all are am I echoing? Is there a problem with my sound,
You're not
Jeffrey?
echoing
Oh, okay. She says I'm echoing. Uh
into the
so
caves.
is that what I'm doing? Okay. Um so by on the basis of their proximity to the site, and then also in terms of a lot of the overlap on some of the content, the assumption was made early on that all of these represented um, caches or depositories of manuscripts belonging to the same group of people who must have lived at this site, Qumran, that was very close by, right? Now you'll notice on this map here that the big cluster of caves, right? Caves 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are basically right there. Like the site of Qumran is virtually right on top of them. In cave 4, as you noted, caves 5 uh sorry, 7, 8, 9 are man-made caves. And they found scraps of manuscripts in 2 of those. I believe it's cave 10 that yielded no manuscripts. I have to read up on that again, but if I if I remember correctly, the assumption is made that it once contained text on the basis of some of the other features there. And there's a smattering of bits that came out of caves 7 and 8. Cave 7 is fairly famously the cave that contained nothing but fragments of Greek manuscripts, all of them very tiny, which itself is quite interesting, and raises more questions again about just the nature of this community. There were other, I need to point out, there were other Greek manuscripts that were discovered in Cave 4. So it appears that at least some people who lived at the site were, not just Greek speakers, but Greek readers and writers, right? But yeah, so Cave 7 is interesting. Cave 8 is kind of interesting to me because it contains a manuscript that's been identified as 8Q mezuzah. I believe it might be the largest manuscript from Cave 8, which is kind of ironic because it could be maybe our earliest example of a mezuzah, a text that you posted on a doorpost or in fulfillment of the instructions from I don't remember where it is. Is it Deuteronomy? It's in two places. It's in Exodus and Deuteronomy. There are instructions about posting the law of Moses on your doorposts. And the nature of this text and some of its scribal features, the fact that the script is really small, the way it's laid out, it was written on a roll, so on a scroll that was not rolled like horizontally. It was rolled vertically. So there's a lot of really interesting features of this particular manuscript from Cave 8, which tell us some things maybe about the ritual practices and the relationship to texts and manuscripts from this site. But sorry, I'm going all over on these tangents.
Go for it.
But yeah, so we've got we should talk a little bit more about cave 4 though. You have them marked out here as caves 4A and B because they're separated into like these two compartments basically. And there is, again, a number of the photographs, the early photographs are marked with A and B as identifiers for which particular cave they came from. But unfortunately, not all of them. This only appears for a handful. And part of this too is in the problem here is in tracking the movement of the individual fragments from the time of their discovery and their first, capture and photograph to the time in which scholars were starting to actually, separate them and organize them and put them together as groups of, manuscripts. So a lot of things happen in that process, which unfortunately have eroded some of our, and we've lost some of our, the early information that scholars have with regards to these texts. But in cave 4 there were thousands and thousands of individual fragments came out of cave 4, representing probably over 550 individual manuscripts. Something else that we saw in cave 4 are man-made divots in the walls of the cave, which scholars have tended to interpret as something for securing a shelving system of some sort. The understanding and the common interpretation is that cave 4 proper, cave 4 itself, is probably the closest thing to like a library, a place where these manuscripts were stored, and which were then used by the people who, lived on the site that was basically just right next door. There's a lot in cave 4 in particular when it comes to evaluating the individual manuscripts and the sorts of damage that they seem to have suffered. One of the things that you see are actual slices across a lot of them made by a knife or by a sword, which scholars have then interpreted to mean that these were probably torn up and destroyed by the Romans when they marched down from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea on their way south to Masada, where the last of the Jewish renegades were holed up at the end of the First Jewish War. They stopped on their way down and basically destroyed the site here at Qumran, uh, burned it, and it looks like probably found this cache of manuscripts and tore it up.
Wait,
So
So you're saying that the manuscripts that they found in K4,
yeah,
there are signs of them being torn up by,
yeah,
Romans or whoever it was.
because we can see a lot of natural damage right
Hmm.
on the fragments. You can indicate natural patterns of damage, and natural patterns of damage are actually really useful and helpful for identifying which fragments belong together and for reconstructing them and putting them in order, right? Because what happens is, like when you know how a scroll is a roll, right? It's rolled up and it's sitting there in the dirt for hundreds, thousands of years. Over time, it starts to very slowly deteriorate, and what you're left with then are like stacks of, or what we call wads of individual fragments that many of them look like they're just stuck together. And one of the first things that the scholars did when pulling, and sorting through these fragments was to very carefully try and separate these individual wads, which represent layers basically in your roll. So these belong together in an individual scroll. You know the order in which to put them because they're part of this roll. So long as you know where the beginning and the end is, and most of the time, manuscripts are rolled with the end on the inside, the beginning on the outside. And because of this, a feature of natural preservation or deterioration also suggests that more often than not, we have surviving material from closer to the ends of manuscripts than the beginning of manuscripts. But there's a technical process in here by which we use our understanding of natural deterioration and the behavior of parchments and papyrus over long periods of time to determine even something like the size of a manuscript. Very large manuscripts will not just deteriorate from the outside as quickly, but also from the inside. So sometimes you end up with larger fragments, larger individual fragments, that are like this big. And they seem to more often than not come from the middle of a scroll as opposed to the end, which probably suggests this was a big manuscript as opposed to a small manuscript. So that's just some of the technicality on how we do some of this stuff. That's a lot of what I do when I'm working on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, but we're talking about caves, right?
Right, we are
So
talking about caves. Yeah, no, you're fine. So, people should check out your channel specifically if you're interested in this topic. You have a whole Dead Sea Scrolls documentary playlist, so a
yeah,
lot of really
and
interesting stuff there.
I'll just say something about that quickly. I am going to be getting back. I've taken about a year off of that. The
Oh,
last video I produced on that was about a year ago, because I've been trying to finish up my book project, which is nearly done. And once I am finished the book project, I'm going to be returning to that series. And the very next video in the Dead Sea Scrolls series, which I'm scripting now, is called "How to Build a Biblical Text." And it's going to be all about just the physical features and what scholars do in terms of figuring out how to put fragments together and what order to put them, and in basically reconstructing texts that we only have small fragments for, right? Which I think is kind of cool. It's going to be a fun one, so I'm excited
yeah,
about that.
definitely awesome. Yeah, so back to our little slideshow here. So
Yeah.
there's a few things I wanted to just point out real quick here. So this is the actual site,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to dive into more detail in just a second here. But I love how the site of Qumran, you have all this archaeology, and then you've got this lovely building, and then you have a city, and then we'll look in a second. There's roads right next to it, so like this is
The
pretty
highway
easily
is
accessible,
right
right?
there. Yeah, it's right there. Like you can just pull over on the side of the highway that runs down
Yeah.
basically from Jericho to into Egypt.
Hmm.
And you can just pull over right on the side of the road there and snap a very nice picture of K4 because it's like literally it's like right there. Uh,
It's not good for right here and right here. There you go. You can barely see it,
yeah,
and it's right over here, right down the
yeah.
road from you. Yep.
And if you continue down that road for another 30 or 40 minutes, you end up at Masada on the southern end of the Dead Sea.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. Alrighty. So to keep going, we have other things that we wanted to show you. So
Mm,
there, just quickly, just a list of texts that we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've got a lot, everything except for Esther, which is very interesting in
yeah.
itself.
Technically also not Nehemiah, but the expectation is that Nehemiah was there on the basis of the fact that Ezra is there. And
Hmm.
Nehemiah and Ezra in every instance that we know of were collected together certainly would have been at this point in time.
Hmm.
So it's
Interesting.
and yeah.
Yep. And here's just nice little map here. So there's 7 locations of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we're talking mostly today about Qumran, but there were other texts that were found somewhere around this time period that were technically in the Dead Sea region, like Masada or
Mhm,
Nahal Hever, that you talked on your channel about. We'll briefly talk about them
mhm.
here later, but this is just one very specific thing. But these collections, they have some similar texts, but they're also very different and very different
Mhm.
people groups, essentially, which makes this conversation even more interesting.
Potentially, yes. That's true. Um, so I mean, maybe I'll just say something
Sure.
quickly about this. If you want to bring, can you bring the map back
Okay.
for a second? So, in terms of the history here too, I think it's helpful to point out that the first cave 1, was discovered in 1947. And then the next discoveries were actually the collection of manuscripts at Wadi Murabat,
Hmm.
which you can see there further to the south. Um, and as a result, the first 2 volumes of the Discoveries in the Judean Desert series, which is the official publication of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And here we're talking about not just the scrolls from Qumran, but it's called the Discoveries in the Judean Desert, right? It's like it's everything from all these sites except for Masada for some reason. Well, yeah, I'll mention that in a bit. So, anyways, um, so the Murabot discoveries were actually published in volume 2, and then the caves were numbered basically at the point of their discovery all the way up to cave 11, which was discovered in 1956. So
Hmm.
and then Matsada, I wanted to say, was that's sort of an interesting place just because the manuscripts that were discovered there that are part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but were actually published as part of the official archaeological reports on Masada by Shemer Yahu Talmud. He did all the work on those. But those manuscripts were found in like an antechamber, a closed antechamber next to this, and you have a picture of it there. We can talk about it when we, yeah, there it is, next to this structure here, which has been identified as a synagogue. And I think you can probably see why. This is probably an accurate identification with the carved benches on the sides, and the pillars in the middle of the room very closely resembles architecture from other synagogues that have been discovered, not just in the region, but in a variety of places. So this is probably right. The collection of manuscripts has been identified as maybe even belonging to something like a Geniza, just because they were in this antechamber, which looks like it was closed off. The thought is that maybe this was a repository for manuscripts that have fallen out of use
Hmm.
for which would, and it would have been the Herodian royal family who had they built the site and were the ones who used uh, the site in, all the way up to the point when the Jewish war started. So yeah, just a little bit of interesting. Oh, this is so. I have to say something about this because this is a like an artist's reconstruction
Yeah.
of Masada, which is this amazing palace complex, like perched literally on the edge of this outcropping overlooking the southern shore of the Dead Sea. It says there this is a print that was made by Likatov, and if that name sounds vaguely familiar to you, she is the wife of Emmanuel Tove, the editor-in-chief of the Dead Sea Scrolls. She's also a very popular artist, and she makes these prints. I have one somewhere, I think. Um, I don't know where it went,
Oh no.
but I've got one. I
I'll
think
trust
I
you.
think I okay. But anyways, it's yeah. In the bottom there, you can see some text. Shamat Matsada. Hey, can you move me so I can read this?
Oh
Uh,
gosh.
there we go. Shamat Matsada Lotifol. Um, the name of Matsada shall not fall. Um, but yeah, that's oh wow, look, they use it for the Center of Near Eastern Archaeology at the Sierra
Yeah.
University. But anyways, Matsada.
Yeah. That's fun. So I guess it did fall though, right?
It did fall.
Yeah.
But this is a, it's the message here though.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to, because the message here, and one of the things that happened is a very, politically significant time when the manuscripts in the Judean desert were discovered. This is right around the time of the founding of the modern state of Israel. And the archaeologist who started the excavations at Masada was Yigal Yadin, who was he was not just a brilliant scholar who, taught at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He was also a very high-ranking soldier in the IDF, and he had a pretty pronounced nationalistic vision for the state of Israel. And one of the things that he did was connect the Second Temple Jewish material culture and heritage to the idea of a modern state of Israel. So very shortly after the I believe he started after the 6 Day War in 1967 was when he actually began excavations at Masada, specifically with an eye to its significance as the last stronghold of Jewish resistance fighters at the end of the first Jewish revolt, right? And so this site plays a very important role in the I guess in the modern narrative of the state of Israel, which is the message, right, on that print. The name of Masada shall not fall.
Oh, I see. I see. There's
Sorry,
a
that was a tangent.
no. That's
Yeah.
okay. You get extra meaning there. Just really quickly, so
Yeah.
I've been showing, and I have a bunch of pictures with
This is
basically
my
this
fault.
picture. Yeah, yeah. So
And
basically, this picture. So one of the problems with this picture is Cave 11 does
it's not where it should be.
not actually there.
No. And this might be my fault. We can't tell. But yeah, because the one before the Google Earth image there is mine. That's the one
Yeah.
I made. And I put Cave 11 totally in the wrong place. Cave 11 actually belongs right there in between caves 1 and 3. That's better.
Yeah.
That's much better. And I know not. We talked about this. I don't know anything about Cave 13. So, and I don't know what happened there when I made the image. But but some of these are really interesting that we should talk about. We talked about Cave 4 a bit.
Okay.
Most people know the story of Cave 1. It
Just
was
really
the
quickly though, could you tell
yeah,
us about that?
the Cave 1 story.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, right?
Yeah.
A couple of sheep herders, young guys from the Tamita tribe, were looking for a lost goat. One of them threw a rock into a cave and heard the shattering of pottery. The story goes that they were afraid and ran away, but came back the next day, entered the cave, and found clay jars. And when they opened them up, they found these rolls of leather wrapped in like a tar covered fabric, and they took them back with them. These turned out to be the first 7 of the manuscripts that became the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's 1Q Isaiah A and 1Q Isaiah B, the Habakkuk Pesher, the Community Rule, the Genesis Apocryphon, the Chodayot, and the War Scroll. Sorry, I'm oftentimes will forget. So the archaeologists came back after these things ended up in the hands of archaeologists, and this was a very exciting discovery. Archaeologists from the École Biblique, which is the French Dominican School of Archaeology in East Jerusalem, came back and actually excavated this cave and found fragments belonging to around 70 individual manuscripts. How can in this cave? Most of them were not stored in jars. There were a handful that were, and of course, these were the ones that were the best preserved, the most clearly intact, and you can see it when you actually take a look at 1Q Isaiah A and B and the War Scroll and the Habakkuk commentary and so forth. The Genesis Apocryphon is really neat because if you see pictures of it when it first arrived in the hands of the Archbishop, the Metropolitan Archbishop Athanasius Samuel, it looks like a great big cigar. It's really, really tattered on the outside. It was an undertaking that took many years before it was finally unrolled because of how delicate and how fragile it was. There it is. Oh yeah, great. I love this picture so much. But yeah, so it's and in very interestingly, these outer layers, remember how I said the beginning of the text is on the outside of the roll, the ending of the text on the inside. These beginning layers are not the beginning of the scroll. That's gone. It's disappeared. Those have deteriorated away. And because this is a large scroll, The same thing has happened with those inside layers. We're missing the end of this document as well.
Hmm.
But that was cave 1. That's what was discovered there, and it kind of sparked this treasure hunt, right? We found manuscripts in this cave. Wow, look at all the caves in along, honeycombing the western shore of the Dead Sea. And honestly, you don't really gain an appreciation for this until you go there. There's literally thousands of caves on this stretch, basically between Jericho and Masada. They go beyond Masada too, I'm sure. But archaeologists are still, poking around in there and looking for more text, because like we have now found a whole bunch of caves which contain manuscripts. So yeah, so they found cave 1 first. I mentioned they found the caves at Mutabat. Next, they found caves 2, 3, and 4, and cave 4 yielded, this massive number of manuscripts. Cave 3 is really interesting because cave 3 contained the copper scroll, which is something, if you're interested in that, Esoterica actually just published a very good video about the copper scroll this last week that I encourage everyone to check out. So like, yeah, it's a very intriguing text, and you can see it there. One of the things that I caution people about is some of these caves, in particular, if you think about cave 11 and cave 3, I think there's open questions as to whether or not they share the same connection as like that cluster of caves there, caves 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, caves 1 and 2. Do they share the same connection to the site at Qumran? They're farther away, right? Caves 3 and cave 11. There were a lot of people. There was a lot of stuff going on in the 60s when the Romans, in the year 70, when the Romans entered the city of Jerusalem and destroyed it effectively. People were like running, fleeing in all directions away from the city. Um, you know, the Copper Scroll is really intriguing because it's so unique. And if you don't know, it's 3 meters. That's like 10 feet for you Americans. It's like 3 meters of beaten copper. There you go. It's engraved. It's basically stamped, basically with like a chisel and a hammer. The individual letters in it. The paleographically, so based on the script, it dates relatively close to the time of the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. It's a listing of temple treasures. It's a remarkable, one of a kind artifact, which would have been an enormous undertaking just to produce, extremely expensive. What's it doing out here? Like, why is it here in this cave 3? It seems unlikely to me that this is something that the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls would have had in their possession. I continue to struggle to connect this particular manuscript, and then by virtue the other handful of manuscripts that were discovered in this cave, to them. And I also have questions with regards to what was found in cave 11. I do need to say, though, one of the ways in which the caves have been connected to one another is through the pottery that's been discovered at a few of them. There were jars also discovered in cave 11, the style of some of which match the jars that were discovered in cave 1. and then fragments of jars that were discovered in some of the other caves. So the suggestion is that the jars at least all came from the same pottery manufacturing plant. And wouldn't you know it, there's a pottery manufacturing plant at the site of Qumran. So, there's ways in which these caves are connected together. These manuscripts are connected together. The other thing that we find in common between Cave 11 and Caves 1 and Cave 4 is the presence of some of the same compositions. There's copies of um what is it offhand? In Cave 4, there's copies of the War Scroll and the so-called Horayot, which were also discovered in Cave 1. In Cave 11, there's copies of a text called the New Jerusalem, which was also discovered in Cave 4. I believe in Cave 11, also at Masada, there are copies of or fragments of a text called the Song of the Sabbath Sacrifice. So, there's these common features have been indicators to scholars that maybe these all do belong to this group who lived at this site together. Less so for a place like for this cave, Cave 3, which is actually the one that's the farthest away. Um, so I say all that just to say we don't really know whether or not all the manuscripts in all the caves all came from this place. I think it seems most of the time, for most of them, it seems likely, but I like to exercise some caution in terms of how we're, processing this, how we're evaluating this. So,
Yeah. So just for clarity here, to remind you,
yeah,
all these pictures say Cave
yeah,
11, but it's really right next to the
Cave
Cave
3.
3. So yeah, Cave
It's
3, Cave
yeah,
11, and I don't know if you mentioned this, I can't remember, but the Copper Scroll supposedly has a list of a bunch of different cities, not cities, but places where there's treasure. So like, it's kind of a treasure map, which is really fun. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, it is. And it's got some information on how to build the next temple, right? So it's and it's similar in that regard. There's to I think the temple scroll contains elaborate descriptions of a a temple of the last days. Um
Yeah.
but they're not related texts in my estimation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a remarkable, completely fascinating manuscript. The one picture you have here, there's in the second row, second from the left, another view of the Copper Scroll. So this, I just want to say something about this. This is John Marco Allegro, and he's looking at the Copper Scroll when it was at the University of Manchester back in the 1950s, just before it was opened. Uh, John Marco Allegro is famous for a lot of the wrong reasons, but one of the really good things that he did was he was instrumental in opening the Copper Scroll, because it was far too brittle to unroll. They were trying to use mirrors or ways of like pressing and getting imprints from the letters inside the layers to try and figure out what the text says. He took it back to the University of Manchester and devised with the Manchester Technical School, which is actually now part of the university proper. Um, I think it was called the Manchester Institute of Technology or College of Technology or something like that. But they sorted out a way and jigged up a saw for carefully cutting the Copper Scroll into individual strips. What they did prior to that was they made a perfect replica of the rolled copper scroll. And when I was doing my PhD research at the University of Manchester, it was like right there in Professor George Brooks' office. I used to play around with it all the time, so that was fun.
That's awesome. Alrighty, yeah,
I know, right?
and one more thing to add. This is from Cargill's dissertation, I think. It's he cited Fan, Pfann.
Oh,
I don't know
Stephen
his first name.
Fawn.
Fine, okay. But he says 55% of the manuscripts deriving from immediately before the destruction of the temple are, I think I cut off that sentence, whatever. But it said this would imply that the manuscripts of caves 3 and 11 were deposited shortly before the destruction of the temple. So if half of the scrolls
I think
there
that's true.
date right there, then that would make perfect sense. That's why they're there. They were related to the destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, and that raises the question. You had sent me a question about this prior to when we started, like the caves. Like, how do we evaluate what these caves are? Right? I mentioned that
Hmm.
cave 4 looks like it could be a library, right? It's different from caves like some of the other caves, like caves 1 and 11. Certainly, cave 3 looks different. Like cave 3 might not even be connected to the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls. We don't know. But with the pottery that was discovered, and with the fact that manuscripts were discovered in these jars in caves 1 and cave 11, Joan Taylor at King's College in London has forwarded an idea that I quite like, suggesting that cave 1 perhaps, and also cave 11 may have been like early examples again of something like a geniza, a storage area or a depository, repository for manuscripts that have fallen out of use. Manuscripts get old. They start to become too too damaged, too brittle, too fragile to continue to use in your daily or weekly ritual practices in your community. You need to replace them. Are we entering a period of time uh, in early Judaism where they start to have this elevated view of the significance of these written documents to the point that they don't feel like they can just throw them away? They have to be carefully stored and retired. I think it's an interesting idea. Of course, this also raises a whole bunch of additional questions because, like, i- you if you think about some of the manuscripts that were in the jars, you've got things like Isaiah, but then you've got things like the War Scroll and the commentary on Habakkuk and the Horeo, which is, just it's a collection of beautiful poetry that has been credited to the founder of the community at Qumran, the teacher of righteousness. But then you've also got fragments from other things that were not deposited in jars. Things like, and these included copies of what we would consider biblical texts. So I don't know, like, how do we evaluate the nature of repository and collection relative to location and apparent function of these caves?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
definitely.
this looks
This is
like
cave
cave
12.
12, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this
So
is
let's
a
talk about
recent
this.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. So more recently, another cave was discovered. There it contains no no evident no. It contains no actual manuscript fragments. What it does contain, however, are pieces of linen that have been identified with linen that came out of caves 1 and cave 11. Remember, I talked about the tar covered linen that was used to wrap these manuscripts. And there's also pieces of pottery in cave 12 which match the they align with the profile of the pottery that was found also in caves 1 and cave 11. So scholars have posited a relationship of cave 12 to the rest of these caves in the area, and it's also it's relatively close to, it's actually closer to Qumran than maybe cave 3, right? So it's within this 1.5 kilometer radius to the site, and it looks like it probably did contain scrolls at one point in time, but these were, found by someone else. And maybe found in antiquity, maybe found later, and sitting somewhere in someone's private collection, or as part of another um, discovery. I don't think we can rule out the possibility that if there were that manuscripts from Cave 12 might have been discovered in the period from 1947 to 1956, when all these other manuscripts were being discovered and misidentified with another cave, right? So we have lots of questions about Cave 12 and not much information. But then also, there's not much more. I mean, there's nowhere really to go from there, because we don't have any texts. Yeah. So cave 12.
Yeah. Any idea how far cave 12 is? Is it even in this picture?
Yeah, like I don't know exactly where it is, but yeah, I think it would be in this. It would be in this picture. Yeah. So I would say probably about midway down the terrace. Yeah, and that around that area, I would think, maybe even a little closer. So and that's the thing, right? A lot of these places are, like you can see the site pretty much from all of them. I don't think so much from cave 3. But then again, you'll also notice that a lot of these caves, you can see like the tons and tons of caves on the terrace there, right? Uh, so lots of these are not easy to get to. And it makes you on as much as they appear to have been, you know, close enough to be associated with the site. Here again, this is where I continue to raise questions. Like why? What are they doing? Um, were these places where individuals who happened to be here at the time that the Romans marched down the shore of the Dead Sea? Were they running away and tossing their precious manuscripts into a cave, maybe to come back later? Were people from Jerusalem doing this? We just don't know about a lot of them.
Yeah, it's like, oh shoot, the Romans were coming. Let me hike over to the caves, just store my text real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's but these are, I don't know. I like these questions. These are interesting
Yeah.
questions to me.
Right. Yeah. So just real quick, if there was, just to make sure there wasn't anything else you wanted to add there. So there's pretty good reason to think that some of these, well, specifically the texts, right? What is this called again? One more
I mean,
time.
they're right there. The cave. I mean, the place where they that's where
This,
caves
whatever
4 or 5.
this natural structure is.
It's a yeah. It's an outcropping of some sort. No, they
Okay.
call it's often called the marl.
Okay.
And there's, but that describes that mostly describes the kind of um like the formation itself,
Yeah.
relative to some of the other ones.
Right.
And
So
this
you,
is importantly
yeah.
the place where they actually found man-made caves too, right?
Yeah,
So
right. So naturally, that's going to be point you towards like this is the manuscripts used by this
I don't think
group.
I don't think there's any question at all, no reasonable question at all, that the manuscripts discovered there have to be connected to the site.
Yeah. Right. So
It's some of these
the other
other
ones.
locations I think we can go, not sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's see what else we got here. All right. So let's talk more about the site just a little bit. So
Sure.
so first of all, the question people might be asking is why, and this kind of hints at it here. So this is well, maybe you can get into that. The whole water. What
Yeah.
is the purpose of the whole
Yeah.
water system and these little like drain looking things that are all across the site? Talk to us
Oh,
about
yeah.
that.
So let's talk about one of the remarkable things of the site itself is that it has been constructed with this very elaborate system of water collection is maybe the best way to think about it. There is, as you would expect, there's a cistern there, and for collecting water, and usually in sites, I believe, I believe it's the round one, actually. So, but it sorry, I lost my train of thought. So, but it's got all these other water, like man-made pools, right? And then and you can see this water system that feeds everything from the water source that's up higher. It comes basically from where the wadi uh where the water flows year round. It dries out this far down, so they actually had to get the water from, the place where the spring was still flowing down to the site. It's a lot of engineering was involved in making this site like operational for these purposes. I think, and I'm not clear on this because I haven't spent a ton of time on the actual archaeological reports of Qumran, but I believe that the water system was built. The site itself was originally a fort that was used by the Hasmonean kingdom in, the second century BCE. But at one point, it it was abandoned, and then it was occupied by this group of of Jewish religious observance that most scholars identify with the Essenes as they were described by Josephus and by Philo. And one of the reasons for this identification has to do um, with the texts. A lot of the texts that were discovered in the caves, and their descriptions of rather strict, stringent ritual purification practices. But then at the site, they've also discovered all of these, what are called mikvah, these pools for ritual immersion. Um, if you go back to the last one, this one is actually, I think, probably the most interesting. You can see the reconstruction there on a couple. I believe it's two of them. You can see that there is a divider that appears in the steps in into this bath, this ritual, this pool of water, right? This man-made pool of water. And it has thought that, as you can see in the illustration, perhaps this was a divider to separate the unclean people who were entering the pool from the clean people who were exiting the pool. This is supposition, but I think it's an interesting idea. But this all feeds into what this site was. The Essenes, the Qumran Essenes, the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls, appear to have been absolutely obsessed with a high level, almost I said that already. It's almost a pathological level of ritual purification that was met by this, elaborate system of ritual baths for, a residency of, I believe, at the high points, around 150 to 150 people living here. So, the reason why here, I think, has to do with some of the conceptualization and the theology of the people. We know that Josephus tells us that there were Essenes everywhere. Lots of them. Philo, I believe this is in both his and Philo's description, but certainly Philo's description talks about the Essenes being on the shores of the Dead Sea, north of Gaza, and which matches this particular location. But we know that there were Essene communities all over the place. So what is this place? There are a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts as to this particular location. Most scholars connect it to a statement made in the community rule, I think it is, which is one of the constitutional texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which cites Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3, which, those in your Christian audience will recognize as having been attached to John the Baptist. In the wilderness, there will cry out in the wilderness a voice, go and prepare the way of Yahweh, make his path straight. That's a slight misinterpretation of the original prophecy from Isaiah, which is more properly understood by the writers and collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There is a voice crying out, comma, in the wilderness, go and prepare yourself, prepare the way of Yahweh, make straight the highway for our God. They applied this to themselves on the understanding that this was their mandate, that the day of Yahweh was coming, the end of the world was on its way. It's time to get out. It's time to go and get yourselves into the wilderness, to get ready for this moment when God and his angels was going to come and defeat our enemies, who was the Romans. Well, not just the Romans. They also thought that God was going to defeat all the Sadduceans who controlled the Jerusalem temple as well, and probably lots of other Jewish people that they didn't like. So, and so this, it seems that this was a place where one of these Essene communities came to live out the rest of their lives in anticipation of the last days. That's an idea. Was this almost like a retreat center for people to come and spend time on a periodic basis in this intensive um, environment of ritual purification and scripture reflection and study, and community? There's a lot of questions we continue to have. We just don't know. I think it's a good bet that this connection is real. This connection between being in the wilderness, ritual purification, and the Essenes. I think this is probably right. But in terms of the nuances, there continues to be questions. Did that answer your question about the ritual
Most of
baths?
that. I did want to
Okay. Yeah.
go a little further into that. So, what I found really interesting about this conversation is you might be thinking, okay, so you did mention the Isaiah text. Why are they out
Hmm.
here? And that makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. But then
Yeah.
there's also the aspect of water, which was that
Yeah.
they interpreted some of the Old Testament law as essentially saying you had to purify yourself in a water that was natural. So
Yeah.
they thought to themselves, okay, this is really difficult because
Yeah.
there's only so much water in certain different places, you know. But so what they said was, hey, we're gonna go to a place where we can get the water to come naturally, a little a little not a shortcut, but almost like a hiccup in the system, right? Where they say, "Hey, we're gonna get all this water, and it's gonna stay there for most of the year, and we're just gonna put little baths there for it, so that way we don't have to go find places, right?"
That's right.
And that's why
Uh,
they have so many baths, right?
yeah, yeah. And the other interesting component of this too is that this ultimately this would have, given enough time, this system just would have killed them all, because they were in terms of the forensic evaluation of a number of the skeletons they have in there's a graveyard here too at the cemetery. um they have determined that a high number of the people who lived at this site were suffering from, I think it's dysentery, that they had likely contracted from the fact that they just couldn't keep the water
Yeah.
pure enough, right? So they ultimately were kind of slowly but surely killing themselves, uh, in this place. Uh, and they, yeah, and a lot of this too. I mean, it's a combination of the water system was not up to task, but also they had some very uncomfortable rules with regards to toileting that created problems as well. So
Oh my goodness.
uh yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, it's a very interesting place, from a lot of angles. I tend to, I mean for me, I spent all my time working basically from this textual question. Do you want me to say anything about the cemeteries?
No, we'll get that to that in a second.
Okay.
But
I actually,
keep
yeah.
going.
No, no, I was gonna just go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Jody, I think it's I can't remember off the top of my head. Jody Magnus, I think it is. But she's an
Yeah,
archaeologist. So she says that
it's great.
they were often, or probably, not only the baths were used a lot because it only this water only came so often. In other words,
Yep.
it would basically just sit there all year, and therefore was reused by a lot of different people. So naturally, it's going to get really dirty. But then they would also drink a little, or there's some question of that, like, you know, which one they drink out of, or if they drink them in general, or whatever. But if they did, that's pretty wild because like they're just
Yeah,
drinking out of their own filth, and their whole goal
yeah.
is to purify themselves, but
Well, I
they're
think,
doing the opposite of
yeah.
it.
So I think if you'll notice on the map, the reason why there's like the round one has been designated as kind of like their proper cistern, that maybe, and that one was maybe the one that was built by the Hasmonean forces who constructed the fort there, is because it's actually disconnected from, you can see it there. It's not actually connected to the
Yeah.
pools directly, and so that was probably a one for collecting rainwater when they could get it, right. But yeah, and that would have been the safest thing to do, certainly. But
Yeah. It is
anyways,
just so fascinating to me. All right.
I don't know enough about some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So Let's see. Yeah, and just to point out, this is like an actual poster, although it looks like it's pretty beat up.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not still there. I don't know if they replaced it or what. On the left there.
I mean, I haven't been to Qumran uh, since 2015, so this it does look like it's in bad shape.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't yeah. There was still, if it wasn't this one, there was a replacement there at the time I was
Yeah.
there. So
Yep.
I don't know.
So if it wasn't already clear, so this is part of Robert Cargill's dissertation. So he kind of reconstructed the walls. So the walls that we see in Qumran are, not really there.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
basically a bunch of pebbles. But in
Mm-hmm.
his reconstruction, you can see all the big walls and stuff like that. This is another fun room. So supposedly the room that possibly
Locus 30.
they possibly
Yeah.
made the scrolls or written. So there were
Yeah.
a lot of scrolls that they brought to Qumran, but then there's another aspect
Mm-hmm.
of there seems to be some scrolls that were actually written at Qumran.
Yeah. So, and one of the for a while now, so Locus 30 is identified. It's often called the scrollery. And the reason for this is because it's a large room. I think it's the second or the third largest room in the structure, and they found the remains of benches and tables and inkwells, and I think they found some styli. I think that's how you say it when there's more than one styli in the room, and this has led to the common interpretation. You can see the inkwells there, which are kind of cool. I'll just say that Martin Skoyen in Norway, the private collector for whom I worked for a few years, has an inkwell. Um, his did not come from Qumran.
Hmm.
It's Nabatean, and it's
Lame.
bronze, and it's amazing. It's very cool. It's amazing, actually. But it probably came from Jordan, uh, on the other side. But it's period relevant. It's around the same time. But these particular inkwells that you see pictured were found, uh were led to believe, in this room. um so this has prompted the idea that, and it makes some sense that these people were copying lots of texts, were writing texts. I think we again need to be careful about how we're interpreting this information. It was thought for quite a while that this was for their own use, and there's lots of indicators within their constitutional text. When I say constitutional text, there's a number of texts in the Dead Sea Scrolls that appear to be lists, or collections of rules for living there. And one of the things that is talked about at some length is the importance of reading the scriptures. We're actually in 1QS, in the community rule, it says that there is to be someone at all times, 24 hours a day, basically reading the scriptures, and an interpreter present. And now what this means within this context is not just someone, you know, sitting in the quiet of their study, or in their bedroom, but this is somebody who's literally, reading out loud the contents of whatever it is the scriptures are. As I mentioned before, there's questions with regards to that. And then there's going to be someone, of a high ranking individual, probably the leader of the community, who is tasked with providing uh, uh, divinely acquired information as to what these texts mean. We have some examples as to the ways in which they understood their scriptures to function in places like the Pesherim, the Habakkuk Pesher, and the Nahum, and the Micah Pesherim, the Psalms Pesher, the Isaiah Pesherim. They engaged in this interpretive process by which they would read these ancient texts and then try to see how they, in their current situation and circumstances, fit into whatever they believe was being described here. And some of these interpretations take on a really creative flavor. So, but that's kind of what's going on here. The thought was for a long time that well, I mean, you need people, constantly producing a lot of this literature because clearly they're very committed to it. This is a big part of their whole thing when they're at the site. I think it might be a little bit more nuanced than that, and I suspect that along with the pottery plant, maybe this was part of their revenue stream. Maybe scribal production was a feature of this group that they used as a service to make money and to continue in things that they might have deemed more significant or more important. This might have there might have been a collection. It looks like they're based on a number of the manuscripts at Qumran that there were professional scribes living at this site. So were they just producing text for themselves, or were they producing these texts on demand for other people who came down and needed things to be produced? So I think there's an interesting feature in the scrollery. There's like a low window that's close to the entrance, which was also understood at one point to be kind of like some have interpreted this as the place where you you order your scroll, and someone is standing at the window, and they go back and they find it, and they bring it back and they give it to you. And if it kind of like a library, if you're just borrowing it, then you take it back, and it's fun. I don't know. I who knows, right? But yeah. So that's why we tend to think that this is probably a room in which Scrabble production took place. But again, we have lots of questions about what that means.
Right. Right. So something real quick is that the actual room that we were just looking at there is a little back here. This room,
There it is.
there was two levels actually. So
Yes,
it's not
that's right.
completely clear, but I'm understanding most scholars think that the upper level was when they wrote or read the text, and of course it fell. So because we
Yeah.
only have one level now, and so we found like the inkwells there. So it's like, okay, so it was either the top or the
And the
bottom,
broken
but can't tell for
benches and
sure.
stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, broken benches. Yeah. So that's a fun question in itself. But here is the tower at Qumran. Did it look
Hmm.
like this when you were there, or did
Yeah.
it look? It
Oh
did.
yeah.
Okay.
No, it's always looked like that every time I've been there.
Okay.
So I don't know. You're wondering about all the like the lookout and stuff that they put there.
Right. Right. Right.
I think that's all pretty old. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
it's a national park, right? So
Yeah.
it's a lot of this stuff, a lot of this infrastructure was built when uh they 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 uh they turned it into
Yeah.
a park.
I
Um,
see.
but the tower is almost everyone agrees here that the tower was built by the Hasmoneans.
Yeah.
And
It's right here, right? Right,
Yeah.
what I'm look. Okay, that's what I thought because you can. This is the Google Maps Earth or whatever. So there's a little lookout or a
A
hood,
roof on it now.
a roof on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's different. But it was funny to me because Jody Magnus was showing all these pictures in a presentation recently. But she has, I guess, some older pictures, maybe when she was there or something.
Oh, wow. Where it wasn't there at all?
Yeah, this hood. There
Oh,
were not.
neat.
I keep saying the
Oh,
hood, the
the hood
roof.
was yeah. The
Yeah, it
roof
wasn't
wasn't there.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is
So,
from her
uh,
presentation,
I guess
but obviously
yeah.
it's not there.
So it's yeah. That's probably it can get really hot uh in the Judean desert
Yeah.
and it's usually sunny. So they probably to help ensure that tourists don't pass out uh
Yeah.
when they're visiting.
Yeah, but it was like a
So
lookout, right? For
yeah.
just in case
So
someone might have been coming to attack them or
and a military lookout, right? So, and they probably, they it was probably a security feature that they utilized, but that was one part, like the one part of the structure for sure that was there from the beginning. That the people who lived and worked there, in the first century BCE, first century CE, they didn't build it.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting in itself. Was it 2 or 3 levels, do we know?
Uh, it was over. I'm pretty sure it was over 2 levels. And one of the ways, so if people are curious, one of the ways that scholars determine this, in the case of the scrollery, it has to do, well, with the fact that you've got evidence of the collapse, on the floor there. Um, but another way is just the relative thickness of the walls themselves. You use thicker walls for building taller structures, and you'll see that too on the tower. The walls are like very
Yeah,
thick
much
compared
different.
to,
Mm,
yeah, they look quite different. So um and I don't, again, I have not read up enough more recently on a lot of the archaeological features of the site here.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. All right. There wasn't anything else you wanted to say about the tower, was it?
No.
Yeah. All right. So this is another
See,
reconstruction.
I think Cargo's got 3 levels on his tower here,
Yeah.
and he's probably right. Uh, he I remember when this came out thinking that he was probably right about most of the stuff. So,
Oh, okay.
um no, yeah. So this is just to give you a sense of what we're looking at here. Um, it's his computer reconstruction of the tower next to like the main building and the dining hall, uh, which is, I think that's Locus 77 actually.
Yeah, that's what it says. I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, this looks like some pretty huge
Looks
building.
pretty serious, right? Like it, and I think this is something that we need to uh think through in terms of who was occupying this site. Like, yes, it was once a military fort that was built by, kingdom officials, but like the people who reconstituted it and occupied it um, had some means to um, basically build it to their purposes, right? I'm struck quite often at, the I guess the identity of this group from out of wider Judean society. They seem to have been widely literate. They seem to have had a lot of very deep cultic concerns, temple ritual. They were very upset at the the Sadduceans who controlled the Jerusalem temple at this time. In their own history, they talk about being part of the Jerusalem temple establishment and having a falling out through which they got disenfranchised. So this is the people who lived at Qumran, I think it's safe to say, were part of this upper echelon of Judean society that we tend to identify as elite. They probably were wealthy. They had means. I think this is reflected in the fact that they were able to rebuild this structure, this site, and that they turned it into a place for producing what looks like pretty high numbers of pottery vessels and scrolls.
Yeah.
So there were professional scribes living at the site, more than just one. Like they had a few, but there were also, I think, within the manuscripts themselves, I can detect evidence of people who were not necessarily professional scribes, but who were very skilled writers, right? Who knew what they were doing in terms of, and there's a big difference here. Um, you know, scribalism is a vocation. It's something that you learn to do in order to make a living, and the priority within the vocation of a professional scribe is legibility and clarity in terms of what you're writing, which is a different set of skills than you know writing out notes or comments on a text that you want for your own personal use or that you want to share with the people who you're, I guess, ministering to, um, teaching. So there are ongoing discussions about how to evaluate the actual scripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls, not just in terms of their age, but in terms of uh, you know, what I do is I'm looking at elements of how closely individual scripts connect to what look like institutionalized systems of writing compared to scripts that look like they belong to someone who's writing in a more freehand, but has a fluidity in terms of his penmanship that indicates that he does this every day. Um, one is the hand of like a vocational functionary. The other is the hand of a scholar. So there's different people living here, different types of people living here, but they all seem to have a close enough connection to writing and literacy that they all, these people came from the wealthy echelons of Judean society.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely appears so. So here's the dining hall. You can see on the top right the what we have left at least. This is the
Mhm.
reconstruction.
Oh, did you? I think you took your screen down.
Oh,
I don't see
you
anything.
got it.
Oh
That's right. All right.
no! There we go.
So,
Yeah,
all right. Once again, top
big
right,
room.
the actual thing. Then there's the reconstruction on the actual thing. So that's really interesting. There's a lot of fun rules in the community rule about when they can eat
Oh
and all
sure.
that, and
Yeah, yeah.
how like if they did something wrong, they
Talking,
would
talking
take away
inside the
food.
temple. Yeah.
That,
So it's they yeah.
oh,
It
that's
was
really
it,
interesting to me.
it was not. I don't know. I think I've spoken on other channels about how much I absolutely would not have had any interest in being a Qumran scene had
Hmm.
I, you know, like, because honestly, it does not seem like the funnest place
No,
to have lived. Uh, but yeah, lots of
but
rules.
while you mentioned that, what they lived, so they didn't. Most scholars don't think they actually lived here, right? Because there's not any really room for beds or sleeping or anything like that. A lot of scholars think they lived outside of the camp around
Yeah.
it in like tents, right?
Yes, they were encamped around the site, which is also a kind of a feature of this is a feature of there's strict observance of purification, and maybe a, how do I put this, like a symbolic um reflection of their ideas with regards to um what's coming in the last days, right? So this is all part of I would say an ongoing ritual of life in many respects. So, and one of the other things that the people who were here, who at this site, um one of the things that they seem to have believed is that there was a celestial temple of Yahweh in the sky, I guess, but into which they would actually go and worship and perform ceremonies on a regular basis in the company of the angels and God Himself. So, and this was a big part of why they had to do this, because the Jerusalem temple was no longer um cosmically efficacious anymore. It failed to function because they hated the people who ran it, and thought they were all corrupt, and anything that they did basically was uh offensive to Yahweh. So they had to do it. But they did it even better because they did it in, the perfectly pure cosmic temple in the sky, with Yahweh and His angels. Don't ask me how any of that works. I have no idea. I just think it's cool as hell. It's just really, yeah.
That's really fun.
So yeah.
All right. So next we have what I don't know which door this is referring to, whether it's the one on the left here or the one at the top right. But supposedly there is a door that comes into the pantry, essentially. And
Oh,
and
right.
in this
Yeah.
pantry, they found all of these bowls that you see on the left
Yeah.
here. Just stacks and stacks and stacks of bowls. And apparently was there an earthquake that broke all the bowls,
Yes.
essentially.
In
And and what?
I think it was the 30s BC is when the earthquake happened.
Yeah.
I might be
Yeah.
wrong, but
Well, and during the earthquake, they stopped living there for a short while,
yeah.
which is what I've
Yeah.
heard, what I've been told at least.
So,
So that's
yeah,
interesting.
and this has been one of the things that I know there for a long time, and I'm not sure what the situation is like now, but for a long time there were ongoing um questions and uh strong disagreements among archaeologists and some scholars, um who are not archaeologists, about uh, how long this um, hiatus was, this absence of occupation was, and the sort of the starting and the ending point of these. Is it the same group who came back to
Yeah.
reoccupy? uh are the How does this affect the ways in which we interpret the connection now of a bunch of these manuscripts to the site? So it's, you know but again, I haven't kept up enough on some of this to know how this is shaken out
Yeah.
among the experts. And there's still uh um the gentleman who leads the excavations there, is it Humboldt, is still working. He still hasn't published everything about the site yet either.
Wow. Huh. Interesting. That brings up a lot of fun questions. It's like, so everybody thought this was like the most amazing. This is what God wants, and then there's an earthquake, and it's like, well, everything's falling apart. We got to
I
leave now.
we gotta go. Yeah. Well, I mean, if there's ever a sign, if you're ever waiting for a sign from God, that might be it, right?
That's
So
awesome. That's awesome. It's like, oh well, I guess there's no earthquakes more. We can go back now, guys. We're good. God still wants us there. Actually, we confused the earthquake. Um, but yeah, here's the with the cemetery, which is really
mhm.
interesting. There are a bunch of different bodies found, and they've only
Yeah,
excavated a very small amount of
yeah,
all of them that are there. But it seems to be that like the very bottom right, those red ones, those are the females and children. The
you
blues
got to
are
keep them
the
separate.
yeah. So the Jody Magnus said that it was because they had Bedouin that would just go and put their uh, dead people there.
Bury
Just
the
go ahead
dead
and
there. Yeah,
reuse some tombs,
yeah,
right?
sure.
Really fascinating there.
But
And but yeah, otherwise, it's almost entirely men.
yes, and for a while too, it was a bit of a surprise when they found female skeletons in the cemetery. And one of the I think, well, I mean, the text seemed to promote this idea of like a celibate male community um living at the or present at the site. um Now, I think one of the reasons for that, and there's been lots of criticism directed to the early work on this. It has to do with the fact that the first archaeologists, the first scholars working on the site itself and on the material, were Dominican monks, basically, right? And there's this tendency to read ourselves back into our historical reconstructions of antiquity. Scholars are not immune to this. We like to see ourselves in all sorts of things. And I think there's probably some of the early scholarship was guilty of doing some of this. And a lot of the more recent work, Jody Magnus, Dennis Mizzi, in particular, have been very helpful in correcting some of those errors, some of those mistakes. But yeah, so there were women there in some capacity, but we still don't know or have any idea what that looks like.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I also find it really interesting how they kind of stopped. Excavating is the word, where
Mm.
there's so many bodies that have just not been dug up.
Yeah,
But
but
but it's also
I
yeah, you go for it.
no, I was going to say, so a lot of that just has to do with maintaining the sanctity of a
Yeah.
human burial ground. So
Hmm.
it's try to do that. Don't dig
Yeah.
don't dig up all the dead bodies you find everywhere.
Yeah.
Uh
Yeah. Fair. Fair. Unless you're in Egypt.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Just kidding, obviously. But the um, I was gonna say that in Jody Magnus and other places I read that they didn't have really a lot on them as far as
Mm,
like items. Like in Egypt, they have all these fancy stuff with it, but in Qumran, they didn't really have much at all as far as like coins or precious metals or anything like that.
mm,
So really when you're digging up, you're just digging up a body, and that's pretty
Yeah.
much it, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
uh, let's go dig up another one, see what we can find. Oh, another body. Great. The same stuff we already have 30 of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it does kind of like, I think some of that also raises some interesting points with regards to how we understand this group within the rule text. There is talk of um, entrance into the community, into this sect, this group. There's requirements about your own property and what you're allowed to keep, and what you have to contribute to the community well-being and resources. So I don't know if some of that is reflected in the austerity of the cemetery finds. I just don't know enough about this particular feature of the site.
So I didn't pay attention enough. Do we know where is the actual cemetery? Is it these little bushes looking things over here?
I think so.
Okay.
Because that's what direction are we looking here? If you can,
So that's
if
that's the
that's
it's the site.
yeah,
I mean, at the bottom right, you can see the
yeah.
the
So that would yeah, I think so. That would be like the northeast. Um, yeah, I think that's right.
I would hope there wouldn't be a bunch of tire marks on the cemetery. But
Hopefully
apparently there's
not.
supposed to be a sign over there, which I cannot see in this. So maybe they took it down. Who knows?
Could be.
All right. So this is fun. There was apparently some type of
Yeah.
potter's mill, and I don't know all we're looking at in this picture, but yeah, it looks like a nice little place
So
from
there's
this
a
photo at least.
yeah. So like, I mean, you can see Locust 64 there is thought to be a kiln, right,
Okay.
for firing pottery. And then and then a number of these other, and I don't know enough about making pottery. I just know that they've identified enough features in this location, which indicate pretty clearly that pottery production was a major feature at the site. And if I remember correctly, the kiln itself is quite large, which also suggests that they made a lot of pottery. And as I
Hmm.
mentioned before, if it seems like not just pottery for themselves. And in fact, there have been finds of bits of pottery in places like Jericho, which look like they may have come from here. So, there are they are they're looks like they're making pottery and selling it uh up and down the Dead Sea. Uh Probably as a way of sustaining themselves, of making sure that they're 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 keeping the bills paid.
Yeah. All right. And then this is another one. There was apparently stables for
Yeah, you
animals.
gotta you gotta keep lots of animals when you're at a place where you're feeding lots of people, and also where you are manufacturing scrolls, because the vast majority of manuscripts at Qumran are parchments. They were made from animal skins,
Mm.
mostly calf skins,
Mm.
lots of goat and cows. And so, yeah, this is it looks like there was a substantial space left for keeping animals for these sorts of purposes.
Fascinating. So there was one other thing, something about, I don't have the picture, but something about a little space where animals have been found, like dead animals and or like the bones or
Right.
something like that. And it's like, were they sacrificed? Was it this some type of fancy meal? And they were put in pots. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I don't know enough about that, I'm afraid.
Well, there's a lot of debate on it, so I don't think most people know much about it. But just to continue, if you didn't have anything else to add, I was going
Uh,
to quickly. Yeah.
no, no. I was
Okay.
gonna say.
Okay. All right. So the just to continue, we are now moving to Nahal Hever. So that is kind of near the bottom of the Dead Sea, and it's got its own fun little story. I don't want to spend too much on time on it, but apparently there was a cave of letters, and I mean, just look how
Yeah.
difficult that was to find. I don't know
Oh,
exactly
so
which one the one on the right is. I don't know what the one on the right is exactly because it doesn't appear to be the one on the left. But what were you gonna say?
no, I was going to say the really interesting thing about, and I've never been here. I was actually that was part of my plan when we were organizing with Myth Vision podcast to do a tour in Israel. This was on my list, was to actually go to Nahal Hever to see the uh, the caves here, and this is south of Qumran. It's north of Masada. This was a place where Jewish rebels from the second revolt in the 130s. This is the Bar Kokhba revolt, were holed up. And the names of there were multiple caves, but the two most prominent ones were the Cave of Horrors and the Cave of Letters. The Cave of Letters, so called because that's where all the documents were found. The Cave of Horrors, so called because that's where all the dead bodies were found. And this appears to have been a site where Bar Kokhba's some parts of Bar Kokhba's forces were actually holed up, hiding out from the Romans. Not just men, there were also women in the company here that was housed, and we have lots of. It's really interesting because we have quite a few. There's a handful of literary texts that were discovered here, but quite a few documentary texts, so letters, um, contracts, receipts. Probably the most extensive of these is known as the Babata Archive. Babata is a woman, so she has a marriage contract with her, and she's got a bunch of other um, you know texts, documents that she's named on. Perhaps uh, the most historically significant feature is that it was in the Cave of Letters that was discovered an actual letter that was dispatched by the actual Shimon Bar Kotsiba, known as Bar Kokhba, um, to this group. So, which is kind of cool. I think it's neat.
So what you're saying, we found a letter of the actual guy leading the revolt.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
In fact, there's a story behind this that is told. It's told in a couple places, but most recently in Mike Wise's book on Jewish literacy that was published in 2019, I want to say. But he talks about actually he retells this story in a book that I helped to edit too. Um, but it's a great story. When Yigal Yadin, the archaeologist, soldier, statesman, also conducted the excavations at Nahal Hever, and when they found the letters, and I think there was more than one. When they found actual dispatches from Bar Kokhba, he, in very dramatic fashion, saved the announcement of this discovery until a meeting of the Knesset in like the late 60s, right after, shortly thereafter, after the 6-Day War, and made an announcement on the floor of the Knesset to the president of Israel at the time, and basically said to him, "Mr. President, I'm very pleased to present to you, um, the at this point, I think it was like the third or the fourth president of the state of Israel, the correspondences from the last president of the ancient Jewish state, uh, Bar Kokhba." So very dramatic, very calculated, but it's a great story.
Very fun. All right. And here's the Cave of Horrors. So there's a whole story behind this, but I did want to point out that's awkward. Here's the Cave of Horrors. There's a whole story behind it, but I did want to point out that if we see here that there is a person and he is climbing down
Yeah,
from the top because that's
yeah,
the only real way in there.
yeah.
Which really is crazy to me as far as the story. Maybe you can just quickly, I mean, we're over 2 hours, but just quickly tell us the story behind this Cave of Horrors. Why is it called that?
As I mentioned, this is the place where all the dead bodies were found. So these are the people who were holed up and hiding out from the Romans near the end of the Second Jewish War. Um, and they were basically in, what do you call this? It's like, they basically painted themselves into a corner, um, and came to this place, assuming seemingly that they seemed to think this was the only place that they could go to get away, and they died there. Because they were in this cave that's very, very difficult to get out of. So yeah, it looks like, if I remember correctly, it looks like most or all of them starved to death, I think.
Oh, really?
I think so. I have to double check. I don't remember for sure. I just remember that they all died, and it's very sad. So
I'm pretty sure from what I've been looking into is that the Romans somehow killed, like, went after them and killed them in there. Uh,
me too. Yeah, I
but
don't remember.
that idea of a story makes it really interesting because it's like, if I'm a Roman soldier, I am not going to be wanting to climb down the side of a cliff to just go after these random
Yeah,
people
right.
that are
Like
hiding.
like yeah, it's not the easiest place to go. To go hide out in the first place, and then also, to advance on. So yeah.
Right. Oh man, that had to be a sight to see. So next, then we have the
We
synagogue of
talked a little bit
Masada.
about the synagogue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Um,
So
and there isn't much to say there, but it's at the very bottom of the map here on the Dead Sea, and there's a couple
it
of
is.
resources.
I will just say about
Yeah.
Masada. So this is it was built by the Herodians, and it was used as their winter palace. Eventually, it came to be occupied by, Josephus says that it was a group of the Sicarii, or the zealots, who were right in the thick of fighting against the Romans, um, in the first Jewish war, and they took their last stand here on the, I think it's on the northeast side of the site. You can still see the ramp rampart that was built by Titus, who was leading the last stages of the revolt. He basically built this enormous ramp to get up, the cliffs, to get into the palace itself, right? You can sort of see it there, on the uh, it's the down over on the sort of the right side of uh the site. It's like it's like a bunch of it's like a deliberate ramp, this enormous ramp that was built by the Romans so that they could just march up and walk right in. It's kind of cool.
Yeah,
But
that's
then
really cool.
and then Josephus tells this very, very inventive story about how everyone died there too. So,
Inventive, huh?
and they according to Josephus, they all committed suicide.
Dark. Well, thank you so
Sorry,
much
did
for
you
coming
say
on
something?
here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think you cut out for a second.
Oh, I just said dark. It's very dark.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is very dark.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, well, that's pretty much all I have. It's been a
awesome.
pleasure having you on here.
Well, thanks, man. It's been fun as always.
Yeah, little tour. Most people are not going to be going to Israel anytime soon, so
No.
maybe this will be good enough for them. When see what I would love to do is I'd love to go to Qumran and be like, see, I didn't know all this. Like I've
There
already
you
been
go.
here, and
There you
and
go.
all my friends will be so impressed, and everyone will love me.
You have strange friends, Zach. If that's what they get impressed by. But
No, 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 they definitely wouldn't.
that's cool.
No, you'd be impressed though, right?
I'm very, very impressed.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
That's
And we're
heartwarming.
friends.
Yeah, hey, look at that. Crazy stuff. Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on
All
here.
right.
Everybody, subscribe to your channel, subscribe to Kipp's channel. And if you want to listen to biblical scholars talk about the Bible and the ancient Near East, subscribe to mine. Thank you so much for coming on here. It's been a pleasure. Anything that you want people
Yeah, man.
to be pointed towards? Any book
Wednesday.
or video?
Yeah, so Wednesday, Dr. Aaron Thompson, the only professor of art crime in America, is going to be on my channel to talk about antiquities fraud, which is fun.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So that's Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. On Thursday, every 2 weeks, my friend and colleague, Dr. Joshua Bowen, and I run a 1 hour Hebrew reading stream on my channel from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. There you go.
And on this channel, even though I don't consider it sinful, we don't advocate swearing, but there's stars, so it's okay.
I wore the church version today.
Yeah, see, it's Christian. It's Christian, guys.
So there you go. I think one of my patrons said she figured out what it says. It actually says, guys, I finally love the Bible.
Amen. So... Wow. All that praying.
Yes. So there you go. But yeah, so Thursday, every second Thursday for an hour from 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific till 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. We read Hebrew, which is fun. Yeah, so there's a few things that are coming up.
Awesome. Yeah, please, everybody should go check them out. Whether you're Christian or not, we are very in a good, I can't think of the words, but it is a really good thing to have Kipp on from scholarship that actually understands a lot of these biblical texts in the ancient Near Eastern context to help us with finding more information, whether you disagree on religious or whatever type of beliefs. we should be thankful in general. So I really do appreciate you coming on here and having a channel and all that. And it's been a
Oh,
pleasure. So thanks so much.
thanks, Zach. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.